Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've been waiting for. A podcast for podcasters. This is Creating the Greatest Show, and I'm your host, Casey Cheshire. Join me as we interview podcast hosts and investigate the ingredients of a successful interview podcast. We'll talk mistakes, earned skills, powerful questions, and more. This show is sponsored by Ringmaster, completely done for you B2B podcast production. That is how my guest starts his show, with energy. And I can't wait to introduce you to him today. He's an absolute badass. Don't even know why he's here. Maybe it's a mistake in the scheduling. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a marketer, fellow marketing automation wizard, I will say, investor, and he has a chain of successful startups in his past. But why are we here? We're here to talk about podcasts. He's the host of the show 10 Years in the Making, CEO and founder of retention.com. Adam Robinson, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm just overjoyed to be here.
Heck yeah, dude. We're here to just talk about that thing you and I both love, other than marketing, other than startups. It's the other thing, podcasting. So Adam, pull back the curtain for us on your show and share your most important strategy for great interview podcasts.
So I want to say it's work in progress. I definitely feel like I have a lot of room to improve, but what I would say is, I had a large breakthrough when the producers of my show, by the way, I first started doing all this stuff 6 months ago. I had never done any kind of founder content creation or podcasting before then. I was convinced that I should do two things: start creating content on LinkedIn, because there was a short supply of content creators versus active users. Only like 1% of active users create content on LinkedIn, which is totally different dynamic than
That is crazy.
anywhere else, right? Like Twitter, like whatever else. And audiences that I would be interested in building are there, like employees and investors and ecosystem and brands. And then I got convinced that I should have a podcast, even if it was just bringing our customers on once a week and sort of talking to them about how great they were. No plan, no kind of like, this is how I'm going to get better and better guests and take from their audiences. Just sort of like, I want this to be an homage to our customers. And I have a deep respect for entrepreneurship. All of our customers are, they're like Shopify businesses with scale. So They have made it a long way in the D2C journey, right? Very talented people. So yeah, I had this idea that I would call this show 10 Years in the Making, and I would talk about their founder journey, because I was of the opinion that they were probably very interesting. And I was right. As I have been so by the way, probably 3 episodes in, this is where I started. The guys who were producing my podcast were like, "Can I give you a suggestion? Are you open to it?" And I was like, "Sure." I'm dying for suggestions. They're like, as you're interviewing these people, try to think about, everyone in the world is busy and has better stuff to do. Like, why are they going to stay listening to you?
Right.
With each incremental second, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of did 2 things to me. One, when I was writing the questions that I was going to ask these people, that was my thought process. Like, what is a listener getting out of this question? So hopefully I'm setting myself up each question to get a response out of this person that at least has a chance of, like the discipline when you write a book. It's like, you got to write a page to make someone read the next page. Like, that just has to be what it is. So that was number 1. Number 2, as I have gone on in this journey, I have been coached to make the content like, a piece of great content is like kind of one of a couple things. One is, it makes you think about, raise your eyebrows, because you're like, I never thought about it that way. So I'm kind of like trying to like ask questions to elicit responses like that. Or a great piece of content is something that someone can just drop everything and do right fucking now. Like, this is something like, okay, here are the 3, best Like, look at your abandoned cart flow, and if you do this one thing, you'll double
Yeah.
your conversion rate right now. Like, open your
Right
Klaviyo
now.
account. Go
Yeah.
do it. Um, so like that's another discipline that I enforced. And then there's this whole other layer that I have been told about that I'm not quite doing yet. That when you have somebody who's really on your team as an editor, like try to make it short form video friendly. So try to like pull out 30 to 60-second clips from your guest or recap him yourself saying it that can be made into short form, because the distribution platforms for short form are so much better than just throwing your thing out to Apple Podcasts or whatever.
Hmm.
I'm not too serious about that yet, because I just know that there's a lot more that goes into that game than just that.
Yeah.
But it's something that I have in the back of my mind. For instance, I was told that some people, their editor knows that when they say some buzzword, right? So like it's like, oh, that's interesting. And you say it like that, like the guy knows to stop and then go back a minute and a half and figure out what it is that was clickable that the
Code
guy just
words.
said.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so like you can have this like so all of this is very, it keeps you on your toes as an interviewer, right? But I think that if you're doing all this, not only will you make a more valuable interview to your audience, you will make it so that that interview can be used in a lot of different ways.
Hell
This is
yeah.
my point, right?
Dude, love this. I can't wait to dive into both of these before we add any more. Part one was just that deep respect for those who are listening, and each incremental second is that showing value to your listener. That's a lot of pressure, man.
Totally.
Do you obsess over it every? I mean, it really is not every second of when you're interviewing someone. You're
I
thinking,
mean,
does this work? Does this work?
strangely enough, I am thinking about that now.
Cool. And
I'm even
before
kind of
you weren't.
thinking, I'm
Before it was
even
just
kind
like
of
lost in
no,
the
no. Before I
conversation.
was
Or,
just shooting the shit with people, but like
yeah.
now it's like it's a much more serious endeavor when you think about it that way.
Have you seen the questions change? I know you said you write them in advance.
So,
Have they
so
gotten more
this is
serious or?
another. This is another. That is what my podcast is today. So I've been doing a lot of work. I've been doing all this founder brand stuff for 6 months. I'm doing a
Yeah.
lot of different things. I'm now in the process of making a shift in an attempt to make it all much better and just be much more intentional about the audience that I'm building, have it actually be lead generating,
Yeah.
have a podcast that more directly serves the audience we're trying to sell to in a way that they're interested in. So
Yeah.
like a lot of the content that I'm creating now is about me building my own business. A lot of the audience that's
Mm,
getting built around it are other founders. Like I'm creating no content related to reporting on the direct consumer e-commerce world, which is who we sell to.
right.
Um, I have been told that um, my audience actually wants highly tactical
Mm,
things more than founder stories. I've been told this. I sort of get it. Like the stage that they're at, like this is what they want to know what everybody else is doing, basically, right? I'm going to change my podcast to be called Leaky Funnels. And we were called retention.com, and our product sort of does that. And when I interview people, instead of researching their background, I've done a few interviews like this. Instead of researching their background and talking to them about their founder story, I'm actually just saying, hey, are there one or two like highly tactical things that you can talk about that like could be the title of our podcast, right? Like this and this with this person. Um, and I feel like, assuming that that's true about the audience, that they want the tactical stuff, it's not only better, it takes me less time to do the research because I
right.
just ask them. And then I ask them a couple questions about how their brand got to where it did or whatever. But it's like mostly like, okay, let's dive into like generative AI abandonment video emails right now.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You know, where did you get that feedback from? Was that directly from the source? Was that feedback from your producers? Because
It's
that's
just from
shifting things for you.
it's just from doing a lot of talking to a lot of people about all this stuff that I'm doing,
Cool.
and it's that, and if I look at the type of people that resonate with this audience, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like there's this guy, Nick Sharma, who's the biggest influencer in this space. And like, that is what he's doing. Like if you look at one of his newsletters, it's like, here's everything that you need to think about in a product landing page in
Mm,
excruciating detail, right? Like, um,
tactical.
so
That ship. I wonder about this too because as exciting as stories can be, I've often found that we're not. If someone's not prepared, if they haven't prepped a TED talk, then stories can be super rambly, and
yeah.
we're like, what's the point? Especially at the
Hmm.
beginning of a pod. I know some people start with like, "Hey, tell me your story," and it's like, yeah, unless you're, Mark Zuckerberg or someone or
Right.
Nick or someone who I'm like, "Oh, what is this story?" I wanna know, like, give me some value right up front. And I almost think of,
Yeah.
like, time to value just like for a SaaS
Totally.
startup, it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
time to value of your episode, you know? Like, how
Yeah.
soon? Even your intro, did I ramble on for a minute on my intro and maybe I could have made that 20 seconds and get right to it, you know?
Yeah.
That's cool. Um All right. So we swap those things around. Writing the questions. So it sounds like we're shifting now too. Would you say they're all, is it less questions? Is it more standardized questions because you're not really going into the background as much?
I think it's not necessarily more standardized. It's just they are centered around um, whatever the tactical piece is that this person's sharing.
Got it.
So, like, I block off an hour to do the thing. I've sort of shrunk the interview to 30 minutes, and I'm like, we'll just talk about it for the first 20, right?
Sure.
Like, bring a couple tactical topics, and we'll talk through what the questions are that I'm going to ask you.
Cool.
You know,
Okay. And then talk to me, like, let's get tactical. Like, this is very meta show because we can be doing it while talking about better ways of doing it and then try doing that. So talk to me about the tactical side. When you're coaching your guest into making those clips that you can then use later, what kind of things do you tell them to set them up? Like tell me some of those things. And what I'll do is I'll tell them back to you and we can see if we can't make a clip relating to it.
so how would I set somebody up to say a
Yeah.
tactical thing?
Yeah. How do you prep them for those sound bites?
I'm thinking back to a podcast that I interviewed a guy. I mentioned this before. It was generative video AI,
Yeah.
founder video when someone abandons the cart. And there's this software, Maverick, which does it. And I was so amazed at how easy it was to set this up and get a customized video, which was pretty much just customizing the name of the
Wow.
person. But
Yeah.
still, it was like, hey, I'm Adam. It was a batting glove company. It's like, hey, I'm Bruce. I saw that you left a bat.
That was Bruce Bolt, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah, totally. So I was like, hold on. I find this hard to believe. Just like, tell me one more time, like how the steps to get this set up kind of thing.
Right.
And then he just say 1 and 2 and 3. And like, so it's like, kind of like you're saying, it's like things can get rambly. And if there's
Yeah.
a really good idea, I think you just can kind of like, it's like, so there were 3 steps there. What was those? Go over those 3 steps again for the audience. Something like that.
Got it. So it really encouraging them to say it again
Yeah. In a condensed form.
in a condensed form. Uh, do you do a prep call and like jog their memories with that, or do you kind of condense it all into that hour?
I don't have time for,
You have time.
unfortunately, I don't have time for prep calls.
But it sounds like you're doing a prep call at the beginning of that time
Yeah.
together with
That would
someone.
be it. Yeah.
Okay. So you're just
Holding the interview to
putting
like
it
a
all
shorter
together anyways.
interview. And yeah, exactly.
Do you find people have enough time to put together their tactical list?
I think these guys are in the trenches and they're living it. So it's something immediately comes to mind.
Yeah.
With everybody that I've asked, they've had 2 or 3 things that immediately come to mind that they can talk about
And what are
because
the
they're
code words
doing
you
it.
use if you hear a clip that you really like?
I have not set
You
up.
haven't set those up yet?
Yeah, yeah. This is like I'm in the process of doing a big migration from how I was doing things to how I am.
Gotcha.
I haven't gotten to someone in-house producing it yet who will actually do that. So
Got it.
I don't have the words yet.
So, mine are kind of lame, but you inspired me to want to make super fun code words for Sam, for Becca. Right now it's wow, that is the quote Like, that's the
Yeah.
quote, guys. Like, this is amazing, right? And then it's like obvious, but it's also, it's kind of subtle, but that then becomes, or at least lets them know that I think that soundbite was probably it.
Yeah.
What kind of content are you creating from the podcast?
Not a lot right now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all like, as I said before,
You just
this was just getting into the motion first, and now I'm trying to do it a lot smarter. I would imagine there are a bunch of clips and other derivative content that can be created if somebody is actually dedicated to doing that. They're making social posts from it right now, but it's like, you know,
got it.
it's
And do
it's
you work
fine,
with a
but it's not.
production company, or you trying to do it
Yeah, a
internal? Or
company called Pod Post Media, and they do a great
okay.
job producing it.
Shout
There's
out
no
to those
question
guys.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's just, when you have your own full-time staff or whatever, they can just dive much deeper and do a bunch of other
Right.
stuff. Like whatever they see. It's not like, I think when you're working most of the time with an agency, it's like you're buying a service from them
Mm,
and they fulfill the service. If you
right.
have an employee, then it's like, do what makes sense from this
For us as a
piece of
company, as
media.
opposed
Yeah,
to they're like
totally.
almost like have to fit into their program versus
Yeah. Which is
custom.
not, there's nothing wrong with it. It's
Yeah.
just, it's not getting repurposed 9 ways because I don't, it's
What
not
what do you
what
envision?
I
Like, let's
bought.
say tomorrow you had a full-time podcast producer on site. What what would you be instructing them differently than, say, an agency?
Keep an eye out for topics that can be made into other, long form LinkedIn posts, short form video, you know, that we can send over to the marketing team to make blogs out of or whatever. Just,
Right.
you know, knowing the type of content that we're producing, keep your eye out for things that would fit in very well to that. Like that's not something an agency does, right? Like it's like I think there's a job title of like content manager, right? Like I would hope that the podcast producer once in house is behaving more like a content manager than simply producing a podcast. They're thinking
Yeah.
about other ways they could use this rather than to, in a very professional way, like get it, publish it, right? Like I want them to do that, but it's like, dude, help the rest of this machine also.
I hear that so much, man. This was a challenge I had when I was even launching my podcast because there's so many people that were like audio nerds, but I wanted like a business podcast nerd. So, oh, here, this microphone, that microphone. It's like podcasting for the sake of podcasting, not really thinking about what is the bigger picture. Like we're creating really good content because we're trying to either do, you know, ABM or trying to do some inbound, or we're actually trying to do something here. Maybe we want to power the marketing
Yeah.
automation, but the podcast is a means to an end, it's not necessarily like the end to the end because we're creating artwork here.
Yeah.
That's
Totally.
cool. What And you've enjoyed it. What would you say you've enjoyed the most about podcasting?
You know, sadly, it's what I'm moving away from. I
Really?
really enjoy just hearing these stories of these people because they're incredible. Um, I mean, I interviewed a guy once who like came here from Mexico illegally when he was 14. He
Wow.
was arrested by the FBI. He like at one point in the podcast, he's like, everybody should spend 9 months in jail. I'm like, can we double click on that? Like, what the fuck? It's like very different than like
That's your quote right there,
these
right?
other like people and now he's got this super successful roofing business. So yeah, I mean, just getting the thing that I enjoyed most about it is the thing that it will no longer be probably. Which
Could you have that second? Because on my marketing show, I'll start with the tactical, but then once we've
I
learned a
think,
bunch of shit, then it's like, okay,
yeah, I think that it can be that
okay.
for sure.
Because I
Lead
hear
with
you, man. Those
value. No one's
stories are
gonna
just
make
like,
it, no one's gonna make it the whole way through anyway, probably. So might as well just like do what I like at the end.
that's a great question. Have you had any feedback from people that have or haven't made it back through the whole
I
thing?
don't have the capacity to have any sort of intelligence on anything right now.
Yeah,
Like it's just literally doing it for 6 months.
got
So
it.
again, now I am trying to get much smarter about everything. The idea would be things get much more intentional and there's some sort of feedback loop between, you know,
Yeah.
that's what you're suggesting, right? Has
Yeah.
there been any sort of response? I have no idea,
Sure.
you know?
You know, I've had a chance to interview some cool folks that are from web hosting or like podcast hosting platforms on the show.
Hmm.
And they've shared with me that essentially from their stats, they've seen that if people listen that first 5 minutes, they'll listen that whole hour.
No,
And the difference
sweet.
between video and audio is like on YouTube, they'll tend to bounce, but
Yeah.
on audio, they're like mowing the lawn or they're doing a
Yeah, they're
run
working out. Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
just going to listen to the whole thing. So, that
yeah,
makes me feel good because I like that long form. I want to get in those stories and
yeah.
I'd love to be able to justify my craziness and not just, force people to have to listen to it. So, what's the biggest challenge for you then?
In life or in podcasting?
Let's start with podcasting, then life.
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is that I'm I entered this whole content creation world knowing that I had no idea what I was doing, and I still very much feel that way. So,
Yeah.
just trying to appreciate that, to know that I'm don't know what I'm doing, and I'm still just trying to learn and formulate a clearer picture about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and what success looks like, rather
Yeah.
than just like, I've heard this is worth it, so I'm just going to start doing it and figure it out later. That's I think the biggest challenge. Like really just defining all of that and learning more and more.
Totally get that, man. We all see podcasts, we hear that it's successful. In your mind, does it go under the lead gen category? Does it go under, content creation category, a little bit of everything? Have you sort of been able to figure that part out?
No, I haven't figured out the lead gen part.
Yeah.
And, I'm just not anywhere close to I would hope that in 6 months I would have a better answer for that. But
Well,
um,
that's funny you mentioned that because my question there to you is if we chat again 50 episodes from now, what would you like your show to look like? What would you like it to be doing for the business? All those kind of things.
yeah, I would certainly like for it to be more of a lead gen tool. Um, you know, I got hit by somebody on LinkedIn that's like, "Oh, if you're spending more than X on your podcast and you're not doing any, paid distribution of it, you're stupid." Like that, uh, that makes sense to me. It's like if you can get listeners for $500 or whatever, and I'm spending $5,000 a month to make it, and it would get 5 times the amount of listeners and they're qualified or whatever. Like, why
Mm.
would I not be doing that? Like, that's kind of a so yeah. I think uh, like to have a product that meets this criteria of being tactical for D2C and is sort of known, and maybe it's like competitive from a following standpoint with some of the leading shows in the space. Like I would deem that a success, and it would probably be a lead gen mechanism for us, I would imagine,
Cool.
if that was the case.
Nice. Okay. Sick. And any dream guests you'd love to have on 50 episodes from now?
I don't even know. I mean, I'm so not, it's strange that I sell into this world, but I'm really not familiar with it. Like
Okay.
they're not people that anyone knows outside of this
Got it.
world, right?
Got it.
Like this guy, Nick Sharma, is the most famous one,
He's it.
and no one besides direct consumer e-commerce people know who he is, you know?
Does any part of you want to then be on his level as an influencer in that world?
I mean, I think it would help me a lot if I was.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that I'm doing is to try to have that sort of effect on people.
Okay.
Like it would only help being well known in the ecosystem as an influencer has no negative side effects on your business, for sure.
No.
You know, like,
Right. Nothing but
yeah.
net. Should you be an influencer of that level, then you're bringing people in just as
Yeah,
much.
it's just there's this wide net of underlying trust that
Yeah.
um, gets kind of connected to everything you do. So
What do you think you mentioned the trust thing, and I've been thinking about that a lot. What about podcasting either builds trust or creates it or introduces it into the experience?
I think it just humanizes, it's like you
Yeah.
can't listen to someone for hours saying with commentary on something that they're a subject matter expert in and not hold that person on a pedestal to some extent. It's just who we are
Yeah.
as people.
Yeah.
Like you are gaining status if someone is willing to listen to you.
Right.
Uh,
One listen at a time, two listens at a
yeah.
time. It's crazy to think about the stats versus, I think sometimes you can slip into that vanity game where you get, hey, I got 2,000 people listening to my YouTube short. It's kind of a little bit of adrenaline hit, but did that drive anything for the business, and then
Yeah.
rationalizing those. Are you sort of, how have you sort of thought about that at this point?
I am not yet.
Have not. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, at this point where it's going from very,
Yeah. Yeah. But, it's
very,
exciting.
very by design. I wasn't going to get bogged down with that. I was just going to see if I could do it. And then now it's like, try to put things in place to, be able to derive and then measure business value.
Like it.
I don't even know what they are yet. So
Awesome, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on here and chatting podcasts with me and all this and like all this fun stuff and talking about the future of your podcast. Where can people reach out, connect with you throughout the pod,
yeah,
throughout the website?
I am doing probably my biggest channel is LinkedIn right now.
Okay.
AdamRobinsonRetention.com, or my LinkedIn handle is Retention Adam. I'm Retention Adam on Twitter also.
Oh, I see that. That's cool,
those are
man.
the 2 spots.
Awesome. And then 10 years in the making, you're changing that name.
Yeah, I'm going to call it Leaky Funnels.
Leaky Funnels. Love it. We'll have to check back in at some point and see what has changed when you've shifted that tactical side and I could see that working really well.
I hope so.
Yeah, man. Cool.
It's what a lot of people are telling me that I should think about doing.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. And yeah, I got some ideas. I'll send you offline for that. But yeah, good stuff, man.
Cool.
Thanks again
Thank
for
you.
coming on here.
You're very
I
welcome.
appreciate
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Yeah, man. For those listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did, then share this with someone else, one person, 9 people, 3,000 people, whatever the case may be. Thanks again, Adam. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. This has been another crazy episode of Creating the Greatest Show. We will catch you all next time. And next time doesn't have to be next week. Life's too short, and we have way too much to talk about. Find show notes full of takeaways, lessons, and links at creatingthegreatestshow.com. For more information on launching your own podcast or working with us to produce your existing show, come on down to the big tent at ringmaster.com. Until then, friends, whatever you do, do it with all your might. Work at it, if necessary, early and late, in season and out of season, not leaving a stone unturned and never deferring for a single hour that which can be done just as well now. P.T. Barnum.